something strange happened. His legendary garage, once alive with the roar of machines and endless ambition, suddenly went completely silent. For years it stood untouched, locked away like a forgotten time capsule. Then someone finally opened the doors. What they discovered inside wasn't just a collection of half-finished cars. It was something far more disturbing: unreleased designs, hidden letters, and clear evidence of betrayal and financial collapse lay buried under thick layers of dust. This isn't simply the story of a car builder. It's the story of fame, downfall, and the haunting mystery surrounding a man who tried to control every detail of his empire, but couldn't control how it all ended. What really happened inside Boyd Coddington's world? And why did so many secrets stay buried until now? What they found in Boyd Coddington's garage will genuinely shock you. Early life before the TV cameras, before the trophies, and long before the controversy, Boyd Coddington was just a small-town machinist with an enormous dream. Born in 1944 in Rupert, Idaho, Boyd developed a deep love for hot rods at a very young age. His hands were always covered in grease, tinkering with engines, shaping metal, and dreaming of sleeker, faster machines. After moving to Southern California, then the absolute epicenter of car culture, he landed a day job as a machinist at Disneyland while quietly building custom cars in his home garage at night. That humble garage would eventually become the foundation for a complete revolution in automotive design. In 1977, Boyd officially opened Boyd's Wheels, and later Hot Rods by Boyd, and his reputation exploded almost overnight. He was completely different from everyone else. While most builders chased raw muscle and shiny chrome, Boyd pursued elegance, blending vintage style with futuristic, flowing lines. He pioneered the use of billet aluminum wheels, which quickly became the signature of high-end custom builds everywhere. His cars weren't just vehicles, they were rolling pieces of art. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Boyd had become a god in the world of car enthusiasts. He won the prestigious America's Most Beautiful Roadster award multiple times, and his creations were in high demand among celebrities, serious collectors, and even museums. That he wasn't just following trends, he was creating them. In 2004, the Discovery Channel came knocking, launching American Hot Rod, a show that catapulted Boyd into mainstream fame. Millions tuned in every week to watch the high-stakes drama of building million-dollar customs under brutal deadlines. Boyd became a household name, American Hot Rod, but what viewers never saw was the growing chaos behind the scenes. As American Hot Rod grew in popularity, the pressure inside Boyd Coddington's shop became unbearable. What aired on television was a high-octane world fueled by creativity and impossible deadlines. What never made it to air was the heavy emotional cost it exacted on everyone involved. Boyd was a perfectionist through and through. He demanded excellence and speed at all costs. He ruled the shop with intensity, pushing his crew right to the breaking point. If a project wasn't flawless, it simply wasn't acceptable. That relentless attitude produced breathtaking results, but it also created a volatile, often toxic atmosphere. Turnover became constant. Talented builders came and went, many walking out in the middle of major projects. One of the most significant departures was that of Chip Foose, Boyd's protege and the designer behind some of the company's most iconic cars. Foose left in the early 2000s after serious conflicts with Boyd and his management team. The split wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Chip went on to launch his own company and the hit show Overhaulin', creating a rivalry that fans still argue about to this day. Inside the shop, things were spiraling out of control. The tension between pure creativity and rigid control was impossible to ignore. Behind the shine of award-winning cars were heated arguments on the shop floor, missed deadlines, and exhausted employees. Boyd's vision was crystal clear, but the execution came at a terrible price. As projects grew larger and more ambitious, so did the pressure. And as the spotlight burned brighter, the cracks in the foundation of his empire became impossible to hide. Tragedy strikes. In February 2008, tragedy struck without warning. Boyd Coddington passed away unexpectedly from complications following surgery. He was only 63. The news sent shockwaves through the entire automotive world. Tributes poured in from fans, celebrities, and former employees, many of whom, despite past conflicts, still regarded him as a true legend. But while the world mourned, something strange was happening behind closed doors. Boyd's once bustling shop, a factory of creativity, innovation, and high drama, fell eerily silent. Projects were left unfinished. Employees were left uncertain about their future. Production of American hot rods stopped abruptly. For a man whose entire life had been defined by motion and momentum, his world came to a complete standstill. Who now owned the rights to his unfinished builds? Who would complete the work he left behind? And most hauntingly, what exactly was still hidden inside that garage? Aftermath. After Boyd's death, his once glorious garage faded into stillness. The walls that once echoed with grinders, welders, and roaring engines became quiet and forgotten. For a time the entire facility was sealed off. His business had no obvious successor. Lawsuits over ownership, intellectual property rights, and unpaid debts began piling up. Family members and former partners fought bitterly over the remnants of his empire. Rumors started spreading quickly. Some said Boyd had hidden revolutionary blueprints for cars that would change the industry forever. Others claimed his office safe held stacks of cash, IOUs from celebrities, and confidential letters never meant for anyone else to read. There were whispers of massive hidden debt, unfinished business deals, and ghost builds that were never shown to the public. Over time the property changed hands. But no one had truly gone through it, until years later, when a private collector and automotive historian finally gained access and began digging through the dust and shadows. What they uncovered wasn't just a time capsule of old cars. It was the buried, unfiltered truth of a man whose life burned so intensely that it left scars, even after death. Inside, years after Boyd Coddington's passing, his legendary garage stood like a sealed tomb, quiet, locked, and slowly fading from memory. Then in 2014 everything changed. The property was quietly sold to a private collector and automotive historian who had long admired Boyd's work. What started as a purchase driven by nostalgia quickly turned into a shocking journey through the ruins of a vanished empire. As the new owners stepped inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. The lights flickered on for the first time in years, revealing a surreal, frozen scene. 7 half-finished hot rods sat exactly where they had been abandoned, some little more than bare steel skeletons. Tools lay scattered precisely where they'd been dropped, as if the crew had simply walked away mid-task and never returned. On one workbench a single design sketch rested under a cracked paperweight, an original Boyd concept that had never been revealed to the public, but the real revelations were hidden in the back offices and locked cabinets. Dozens of hand-drawn blueprints, some dating back to the 1980s, were discovered sealed in flat files. Many represented ideas that were never built, never shown, and possibly never intended to be seen by anyone else. Among them was a design for a hybrid hot rod, a concept decades ahead of its time. Some experts later said it could have completely redefined Boyd's legacy if it had ever been completed. Even more unsettling were the stacks of unpaid invoices, many marked urgent in red ink, with vendor names still well known in the custom car world. Some had been carefully filed away, others were crumpled and tossed aside. In a locked drawer they found personal letters. One in particular hinted at a betrayal so close to Boyd that he couldn't bring himself to name the person directly. It was addressed only by initials and contained language suggesting he was preparing to confront someone he once trusted deeply. There were also lists, dozens of them, written meticulously in Boyd's own handwriting. Priority builds. collectors to contact. Do not show anyone. It became painfully clear that Boyd had been planning something massive before his death, perhaps a major comeback, perhaps a complete reinvention of his brand. He never got the chance to bring any of it to life. What had started as a simple real estate purchase had become the unearthing of a mystery. The garage wasn't just filled with metal and machinery. It held secrets, regrets, and a final, unspoken message from a man who died with far too much left unfinished. The rivalry as investigators sifted through the artifacts left behind in Boyd Coddington's garage, one name kept surfacing again and again: Chip Foose. To fans, Chip and Boyd were once the ultimate team, mentor and protege, vision and execution working in perfect harmony. But behind closed doors their relationship was far more complicated, filled with jealousy, creative tension, and ultimately betrayal. In the early 2000s, Chip Foose was Boyd's star designer. His sleek lines, innovative sketches, and modern twists on classic hot rods helped create some of Boyd's most legendary builds. Together they won awards, dazzled clients, and seemed unstoppable, but as Chip's own reputation grew, so did the friction. Boyd, famous for controlling every detail of his company, reportedly began to feel threatened. Former employees claimed Boyd would reject Chip's designs out of pure spite. Others said Chip grew tired of staying in the shadows while Boyd took all the credit. Their professional split was sudden and dramatic. Chip walked away and launched his own company, Foose Design. Soon after, Overhaulin' premiered with Chip as the star. It was everything American hot rod wasn't: emotional, collaborative, and completely free of Boyd's explosive temper. While Boyd's shop was crumbling under stress and mismanagement, Chip's career soared. Inside Boyd's private office, a locked file cabinet revealed letters, sketches, and notes that told a very different story of their feud, one the public never saw. One letter, seemingly unsent, accused Chip of stealing ideas and threatened legal action. Another sketch, dated shortly before Chip's departure, was labeled "For My Eyes Only," and looked eerily similar to a vehicle Chip later revealed under his own brand, but it didn't end there. A spiral notebook marked "Next Phase" outlined Boyd's plans to reclaim dominance in the industry. At the center of that strategy was a new line of high-concept hot rods, designs he believed would completely overshadow his former apprentice. Those builds were never completed. But the intention was unmistakable: this rivalry wasn't just about cars. It was about identity, legacy, and control. And even after Boyd's death, his feelings toward Chip Foose remained preserved in ink, hidden behind locked drawers and layers of dust. The discovery added a darker, more personal layer to Boyd's story, one that challenged everything fans thought they knew. The documents as the layers of Boyd Coddington's garage were carefully peeled back. One of the most chilling discoveries had nothing to do with cars. It was a thick stack of documents buried inside a rusted file cabinet labeled "Confidential." Inside were folders overflowing with unpaid bills, past due notices, legal warnings, and tax records that painted a completely different picture from the one shown on television. Behind the shine of polished chrome and flawless paint jobs was a financial crisis that had been quietly growing for years. Boyd's hot rod empire looked untouchable from the outside. He had a hit TV show, an elite client list, and one of the most iconic brands in the industry. But beneath that polished surface was a deeply mismanaged business. The documents revealed debts totaling millions of dollars. Dozens of vendors, machinists, and suppliers had submitted invoices, many dating back nearly a decade, that had never been paid. Some had even pursued legal action, only to be silenced through private settlements. Even more alarming was a 2005 internal audit report found tucked inside an envelope marked "For Boyd Only." The report detailed mounting losses, missed payroll deadlines, and poor bookkeeping practices. It warned that without a complete financial restructuring, the company would collapse within 3 years. That prediction proved hauntingly accurate. Bank statements discovered in a locked desk drawer showed irregular withdrawals and overdrawn accounts, some clearly tied to personal expenses. In one document, Boyd had applied for a loan using one of his unfinished cars as collateral, even though that same car had already been promised to a collector. There were also multiple cease and desist letters regarding alleged trademark violations and contract disputes tied to American hot rod merchandise. One file, labeled "Do Not Open Without Legal Counsel," contained a draft lawsuit from a former business partner accusing Boyd of fraud and intellectual property theft. The case never reached court, but the accusation alone cast a long, dark shadow over Boyd's carefully built public image. To the outside world, Boyd was the king of custom cars, a visionary pioneer who could turn a rusty shell into a masterpiece. But inside those walls the truth was far harder to accept. A man whose ambition had far outrun his resources, whose empire was built on ever-growing debt, and whose obsession with perfection may have blinded him to the chaos building right under his nose. The financial records were a sobering reminder that even legends can fall, and that behind every dazzling showroom is often a back office filled with secrets. The journal among the rusted tools and forgotten car frames, the most haunting discovery wasn't a vehicle at all. It was a small leather-bound journal hidden in Boyd Coddington's personal desk, covered in fingerprints, dust, and the weight of years. The pages were filled with tight, cramped handwriting, Boyd's private thoughts during the final years of his life. What those entries revealed was far more personal and tragic than anyone expected. The journal wasn't a daily log. It was a raw collection of reflections, plans, regrets, and fears. Boyd wrote openly about his desperate struggle to keep the empire afloat. He described sleepless nights, staff he no longer trusted, and clients who were growing impatient and angry. One entry read, "Everyone sees the cars. No one sees the pressure. I can't keep doing this much longer." In another he referred to unfinished business and hinted at a betrayal so close to him that he couldn't bring himself to write the name. Boyd's son Chris Coddington later stepped forward in an attempt to carry on the torch. He launched a new version of the brand, Boyd Coddington Wheels, focused on preserving the design legacy while updating the product line for a modern market. Though the effort received support from many loyal fans, it was clear the original spark that once set the industry on fire was almost impossible to recreate. Orders slowed. Recognition faded. Collectors, however, began viewing Boyd's original creations in a completely new light. Cars once treated as flashy showpieces were now seen as true relics of a golden era. Auction prices started climbing steadily. Unfinished builds pulled from the garage were completed by loyal former employees or specialist restorers, often selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. One partially completed Roadster, left exactly as it was the day Boyd died, fetched over $300,000. These vehicles were no longer just cars. They had become symbols, frozen moments in a man's journey. Each one told a story of ambition, chaos, artistry, and heartbreak. For some collectors, owning a genuine Coddington original became a mission to preserve automotive history. For others it was about rescuing a vision that never reached the open road. But for all the renewed reverence surrounding Boyd's legacy, there was also a quiet acknowledgement of what might have been. His plans for a final collection, a series of groundbreaking designs meant to redefine the custom scene, were never realized. The pieces were all there, sketches, parts, concepts. But the hands with the vision and drive to bring them to life were gone forever. In the end, Boyd's empire didn't rise again in full glory. But fragments of it, scattered like shrapnel throughout the car world, continued to influence a new generation of builders and designers. And for every rusted chassis and forgotten tool that came out of that dark garage, something else emerged, a renewed appreciation for the complicated, deeply human man behind the myth. Boyd Coddington's story didn't end with his death. It echoed like the low, idle rumble of a half-built hot rod left waiting in a dark garage, forever unfinished. What began as a tale of innovation and unstoppable ambition became something far more human, far more fragile. The discoveries inside his garage, unfinished cars, secret plans, financial wreckage, and handwritten regrets, gave the world one final, unfiltered glimpse at a man whose public image told only half the story. To millions of fans, Boyd was the face of custom cars, bold, brash, brilliant. He could take a rusted shell and turn it into a masterpiece, reshaping the entire American hot rod scene forever. His influence launched a new wave of builders, designers, and television shows, redefining how the world viewed car culture. But behind the confidence and celebrity was a man drowning under pressure, chasing perfection at the expense of stability, relationships, and ultimately his own peace. The journal, the letters, the abandoned builds, they tell the story of a man who knew the walls were closing in. He tried desperately to hold everything together, to finish what he started, to reclaim what was slipping away, but in the end the empire he built with his own hands outgrew even him. The final image is haunting, a dust-covered garage, silent and still. Half a dozen cars frozen in time. Tarps draped like shrouds. Tools laid to rest. And tucked in the corner, Boyd's last blueprint. A vision that would never touch pavement. For anyone who steps into that space it feels like walking into a monument, not just to Boyd's incredible success, but to his struggle. Yet even in collapse his empire left behind something powerful, a legacy etched into metal, rubber, and memory. His designs still inspire. His mistakes still teach. And his story continues to challenge the myth of effortless success in the spotlight. What they found in Boyd Coddington's garage wasn't just shocking. It was tragic, beautiful, and profoundly human. In the end he wasn't merely a builder of hot rods. He was a builder of dreams, some fully realized, others forever unfinished. What do you think about Boyd Coddington's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind the legends.